Hey, I'm AnthonyRomano. I've been doing keto for about 10 years now, almost, and I'm going to give you my take on the PE diet in this video. So if you're unfamiliar with the PE diet, this is from Ted Naiman, Dr. Ted Naiman, and Will Shufelt. They wrote the book, The PE Diet, and I think it's great, but I'm going to give you some of my 2 cents on this topic just so you can enhance your knowledge of some of these underlying principles behind body composition. So if you could like the video, that would be really helpful for me because that's going to make YouTube show my content to more people. And I'm also drinking a cup of coffee out of my sister's face from when she was a baby. Anyways, let's get into the video. So let's start off by explaining what is the PE diet, because I've had a lot of people ask me to give my 2 cents on this. So the short and skinny, because obviously you should go support Will Shufelt and Dr. Ted Naiman with their work and consume it yourself. But at the same time, the main principle is that body composition is centered on the amount of protein you have and the ratio between the protein you're intaking and the energy. Okay, because protein is like bricks for a house. Okay, it's not a laborer, it's not a good fuel source in and of itself. Okay, it's nitrogen. Okay, fats and carbs are the carbon base, they're the fuel base. Okay, so basically by limiting the ratio, but we're basically putting it in favor of protein rather than whatever your preferred source of energy is, you're going to create weight loss, muscle building, and there's a load of other metabolic benefits that you will get, which you can read about in their book, The PE Diet. Now, for me, as a keto guy, you might be thinking that I'm stancing myself in the sort of insulin obesity model of weight loss, right? I actually try to deviate from that. So for those of you who are unfamiliar, the insulin obesity model basically says insulin's the only thing that matters. Well, it's the primary thing because it is permissive of fat storage, and basically if you do not have an insulin spike, you're not going to gain weight, and as long as you're eating foods that keep your insulin low, you are going to burn body fat. This is not always true, and my sort of beef with this, my sort of, little addition to this claim is that, it doesn't take into account the demand for fuel to be stored, okay? It is a hormonal approach to looking at gaining leverage on your body's fuel economy. Okay, but that is the only thing that actually matters here, gaining leverage on your body's fuel economy. So by lowering the type of foods that will produce an anabolic hormone rise like insulin, that is one way to create fat burn. But it's not the only way, in my opinion. It's actually only the qualitative side of the coin. Okay, you can either look at the total amount of energy you're consuming, or you can look at what every individual food is doing to you on a hormonal level. So for me, my stance, I have found the model that works for me, and that I have not found anything to ever contradict, is that there are 2 sides of the coin. You can look at things quantitatively through a calories in, calories out. You can look at things quantitatively in a better way, which I personally believe is the PE approach, and from my reading of it, is that basically that's a better way to grab this sort of quantitative bird's eye view of things, where you're looking at the total amount of energy coming in and the demand for stored fuel to be burned. Okay? And then on the other side, there are ways to hormonally influence your body to do certain metabolic processes, okay? So of course, if I wake up in the morning and don't eat anything, my cortisol is going to be elevated. I will have a higher propensity to burn body fat if I do some exercise during that. We can't ignore either side of the coin is the point here. There's no way to have only one side exist, because we know that, example, some people can start off using a keto approach where they're focusing only on this sort of insulin obesity model, and they will lose weight, but eventually they will plateau because their body has reached homeostasis in a certain way with that current hormone balance, and now they need to leverage the fuel economy more by focusing on the demand and lowering the energy, raising the protein, which is a very thermogenically expensive macronutrient. So it's going to create more demand for fuel to be burnt. Okay, so there are ways that you have to marry the 2 sides of this coin, is the point I'm getting at. And that's personally my perspective here. I'd be very interested to speak with Dr. Naiman or Will Shufelt on this topic. But at the same time, hey, credit where it's due. Check out their work if you're interested in it. One thing I'd like to add too is that I certainly believe that the PE approach is a better way to do a diet that is inclusive of carbohydrate. So granted, like I said, just because I do a lot of keto stuff doesn't mean I don't coach or work with people who do carbohydrate-based dieting. In fact, I work with plenty of people where we use them in a strategic way, and that's how I like to use them in my own life. But the point is, I personally believe the approach of looking at your protein and then not discerning over, it has to be whatever 40% carb and 20% fat. You don't want, that's too tedious, and that, in my opinion, is under-inclusive of how necessary fats are. So a lot of times you will need fats for hormone production. They're the precursors to with cholesterol to all the major sex hormones in your body. So in my opinion, especially because I prefer to do ketogenic dieting with no carbohydrates most of the time, it is a better way to structure your carb days, or for people who are not only doing massive high carb diets, because that way you don't discern over, oh, I need this much carb and this much fat in this exact ratio. All you need to focus on is the protein and then how many calories worth of energy you're getting from the combined amounts. Now, granted, a lot of people will say the cardinal sin of fitness is to never mix carb and fat. Of course, you don't want to do this in excess. This is going to lead to higher de novo lipogenesis. It's going to lead to more propensity for fat to be stored. But the point is, as far as a practical measuring stick to ensuring that your body composition is always where you want it to be, it's a great way to make things effortless. And I actually think it is it's less dogmatizing than the sort of camps we split things into nowadays, where it's like, oh, you're doing carbs, so you have to do a high carb diet. You're doing no carbs, never touch carbs, they're the devil. Okay, so I think it's far better for that. And that's actually one area where I really do give credit to Dr. Naiman and Will Schufelt for this approach, because in my opinion, it's a far better way to handle diets that are inclusive of carbohydrate. So if you do want to have higher amounts of carb, go for it. But of course, it never neglects the benefits of fat and basically fitting it into a healthy diet. But for my stance here, I personally believe that there is a quantitative side and a qualitative side of body composition. And of course, this is a broad simplification that I'm just making for a video to address this topic. But the point is, I'll show you now how to marry these two. Because from my stance, from my body of client experience, from my years of dieting, fitness, and bodybuilding, all that stuff. So in my opinion, the way to merge these two is you're going to pick an approach to let's say you're trying to lose body fat. You're going to pick an approach and build muscle. You're going to pick an approach you like. So if you want to do a carbohydrate-based diet, you can do that. If you want to do a ketogenic diet, which is my preference, and I do it year-round basically, with strategic carbs when I feel like it, whatever approach you want to do, eventually, depending on your goals, you're going to have to marry the two. So if you're doing keto, at first, if you want to be lazy, you don't want to count calories, go for it. Go for a higher fat approach, because on one hand, lowering the insulin is going to be a big shock to your body. But if you're somebody who's already relatively lean, it's not going to do much for you, because you have to create more demand on your metabolism to metabolize. So on the other hand, if you're somebody who is doing a high carbohydrate diet and you're limiting the energy, let's say you're having 400 grams of carb a day. That's a lot. But if you have a big BMR, larger person, and you're getting enough protein, you will be able to lose body fat by virtue of, having the calories in a amount where there is still demand for fuel to be used up from your stores. So from there, if you want to simply leverage the other side of the coin, the qualitative side of the coin, you could, for example, do a carb backloading routine, or you could start doing intermittent fasting. You could time things differently, because now what you will do with the same amount of carbs and protein and calories, if you simply do your workout fasted, you're going to create more fat burn because of the catabolic effects of cortisol when in the presence of low insulin, and how that basically targets fat tissue for burning, and because of other effects, like example, the Cortis-Douglas effect. So the Cortis-Douglas effect is basically after any sort of exercise you do, regardless of if you're eating carbohydrates or not, your body's going to start to produce ketones after that exercise if you don't eat. So this is a phenomenon that we've known about since the 30s, okay? There's work on this. I've referenced this work in my book, The Keto Shred Program, which you can check out on my website, romanoketo.com. But the point is, there are other hormonal tactics from this other side of the coin, the qualitative side of the coin, that looks at what you're doing rather than the total numbers, okay? So there are ways that you can start using both sides of the coin, and in my opinion, just don't limit yourself. Don't limit yourself to doing only keto. Don't limit yourself to doing only calorie counting. I personally think a lot of people could do the calorie counting approach and start to leverage it in the sort of PE ratio manner that Naiman and Will Schufelt explain. Because if you start raising the protein, isn't that in and of itself a qualitative measuring stick? Because that protein is metabolized and processed differently in the body than fuel sources like carbs or fats. So the very fact that protein is something different than just fuel implies that there are qualitative effects of this coin. There are individual macros and individual manipulations you can do that will create certain results by virtue of how they are processed, their mechanisms. Okay? So example, a lot of people could take a calorie counting approach and then start to maximize the protein energy ratio until they get to a point where they're completely, maybe it's starting to get more challenging. And then in my opinion, from there, they could switch it over to a ketogenic approach where there's less blood sugar volatility. You're starting to focus more on intermittent fasting, perhaps. You're doing longer spans of time in between meals because that way you're going to allow more stable insulin and stable blood sugar, which will make the smoothness of a diet feel more enjoyable. So there's lots of ways to incorporate this together, but I'd be very interested to hear some of your feedback. So leave me some comments down below. I'm happy to help out where I can and definitely discuss this topic more with you in that section. So if you're interested as well, hit me up on Instagram. And from there also, if you want to get the Keto Shred program, go straight to the promised land of fat loss. This is my Mona Lisa, okay? This is my biggest collection of fat burning tactics organized in the manner that is the most conducive to getting shredded, whether you're a newbie or a pro. And there's also some ability to build muscle in here as well if you're interested on doing that during a cut. I don't know many dieting, approaches that can kind of, promise that in some way. So if you're interested in that, go to RomanoKeto.com. I also offer consultations and coaching. And hey, if you're somebody affiliated with the PE diet, I'd be happy to discuss with you too. So thank you for your work. And like I said, there's already so many names that I try to give credit to in all these videos because I truly am, standing on the shoulders of giants here with a lot of this research. Okay, I'm not a scientist. I don't do this research myself. I just vet through it and try to give you guys my insights. So thank you for watching this video. I'm Anthony Romano. Peace.